You know, one of the things that the Comes of Age, I was reading the preface of the book Comes of Age, and it gives you an explanation of what that book is. And what Comes of Age says, I'll bring it up here and read it next week. It says that they give you an explanation of how they came about the 12 steps and how they came about, you know, the idea of recovery. And it's a really good stuff in there, a lot of important. I mean, I know a lot of people come into AA and they go, you know, don't analyze, utilize. I go, what are we, stupid? We can't do both at the same time? Can't chew gum and walk at the same time? Page 20, right in the middle, it is the purpose of this book. That's where we left off last week, I believe. It is the purpose of this book to answer such questions specifically. Well, let's go back up a little bit so we will know what he's talking about there. If you are an alcoholic who wants to get over it, you may already be asking, what do I have to do? It is the purpose of this book to answer such questions specifically. We shall tell you what we have done before going into a detailed discussion. It may be well to summarize some points as we see them. So obviously he's fixing to give us some details, and that's one of the things that I didn't know over the years, was that there really are some very detailed. It was years in sobriety before I realized that the details of exactly how to forgive are in here. People made vague passing references to that. Even that stupid thing where they have the principles behind the steps, which isn't AA, forgiveness isn't even on that. It's like they got brotherly love, which what page is that on? I never even seen that in here. Brotherly love or any of that other stuff, but the precise directions on how to forgive are in here. And that's one of the most important things in our lives. So detailed discussion. Before going into detailed discussion, it may be well to summarize some points as we see them. How many times have people said to us, I can take it or leave it alone? Why can't he? Why don't you drink like a gentleman or quit? That fellow can't handle his liquor. Why don't you try beer and wine? Lay off of the hard stuff. His willpower must be weak. He could stop if he wanted to. She's such a sweet girl. I should think he'd stop for her sake. The doctor told him if he ever drank again, it would kill him. But there he is, all lit up again. Now, these are commonplace observations on drinkers, which we hear all the time. Back of them is a world of ignorance and misunderstanding. We see that these expressions refer to people whose reactions are very different from ours. Moderate drinkers have little. So this is where he's going to go into these four types right here. Or is it three? We'll count them as we go through them here. And one of the things that he's fixing to point out right here, and this is one of the things that I point out to my sponsees, is that when you come into Alcoholics Anonymous for the first time and you're looking around the room, and we watch people, see what they're doing. I know I do. I do it. I've been sober 20 years and I still do it. I watch the new people and I watch the old people. I see who's doing what. You know, I want to know who to emulate, who to hang around, who to, you know, hang with, to talk to, or whatever, you know. Who not to be like, you know. So what he's doing here is he's going to give us these types of alcoholics, and he's going to tell us that some of these people, these types that he's saying here, can stop on a non-spiritual basis. They can stop drinking without turning to God for help. And those are the people who some other people are coming in here and they're saying to themselves, how come I have to work so hard at this? Why can't I do like that guy and just hang out and do nothing? Come in late, stroll in, you know, leave early, hit on the women, horse around, go out and smoke cigarettes and answer the phone all day. Why can't I do that? Why do I have to work so hard? Because not everybody in AA is the worst case scenario, and that's what he's fixing to point out right here. Watch. Moderate drinkers have little trouble in giving up liquor entirely if they have good reason for it. They can take it or leave it alone. And remember that the only requirement for membership in AA is a desire to stop drinking. The requirement for membership does not say, oh, you got to be the worst case scenario in which only a spiritual solution will relieve you of that obsession for that first drink. Because we let all those people in here, and we're not going to say, no, you got to go. If you don't need a spiritual solution, you got to hit the door. All we'd have is a desire to stop drinking. They can take it or leave it alone. Then we have a certain type of hard drinker, so we got moderate drinkers and hard drinkers here. He may have the habit badly enough to gradually impair him physically and mentally. It may cause him to die a few years before his time. If a sufficiently strong reason, ill health, falling in love, change of environment, or the warning of a doctor becomes operative, this man can also stop or moderate, although he may find it difficult and troublesome and may even need medical attention. But what about the real alcoholic? So that's 3 different types he's given us. And I know that there are 4 of them outlined out in the chapter to wives. I'm not sure if the 4 types outlined in the chapter to wives are the real alcoholic and broken down in the real alcoholic into 4 types, or these types that he's given us here as a moderate drinker, a hard drinker, or the real alcoholic. He may start off as a moderate drinker, or he may not become a continuous hard drinker, but at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink. Here is the fellow who's been puzzling you, especially in his lack of control. He does absurd, incredible, tragic things while drinking. He is a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He is seldom mildly intoxicated. He is always more or less insanely drunk. His disposition while drinking resembles his normal nature but little. He may be one of the finest fellows in the world, yet let him drink for a day, and he frequently becomes disgustingly and even dangerously antisocial. He has a positive genius for getting tight at exactly the wrong moment, particularly when some important decision must be made or engagement kept. He is often perfectly sensible and well-balanced concerning everything except liquor. But in that respect, he is incredibly dishonest and selfish. He often possesses special abilities, skills, and aptitudes, and has a promising career ahead of him. He uses his gifts to build up a bright outlook for his family and himself, and then pulls the structure down on his head by a senseless series of sprees. He is the fellow who goes to bed so intoxicated he ought to sleep the clock around. Yet early next morning he searches madly for the bottle he misplaced the night before. If he can afford it, he may have liquor concealed all over his house to be certain no one gets his entire supply away from him to throw down the waste pipe. As matters grow worse, he begins to use a combination of high-powered sedative. Wait a minute. We're talking about drugs in an AA meeting, aren't we? Wait a minute. I heard that's not the right thing to do around here. This is the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it says this. He begins to use a combination of high-powered sedative and liquor to quiet his nerves so he can go to work. Then comes the day when he simply cannot make it and gets drunk all over again. Perhaps he goes to a doctor who gives him morphine. This is AA. We can't talk about this. What? So we got to change this book, huh? Doctor who gives him morphine or some sedative with which to taper off. Then he begins to appear at hospitals and sanitariums. This is by no means a comprehensive picture of the true alcoholic, as our behavior patterns vary, but this description should identify him roughly. Why does he behave like this? If hundreds of experiences have shown him that one drink means another debacle, with all its attendant suffering and humiliation, why is it he takes that one drink? Why can't he stay on the water wagon? What has become of the common sense and willpower that he still sometimes displays with respect to other matters? Perhaps there will never be a full answer to these questions. You know, that one statement right there has always... I have to tell you, I've studied the idea. I personally, for a couple of years, I had this thought in my head. I said, okay, so the spiritual solution to alcoholism is to get God in your life. Therefore, alcoholism essentially is a lack of God. Therefore, once you get God in your life, how come it is that you still can't drink again? That at no point, no amount of God and spirituality will ever allow you to drink one drink of alcohol without it going. So this is one of the questions that cannot be answered in Alcoholics Anonymous. How come you can get this spiritual solution and you will be immune to that first drink and you will never take an... See, that's all we offer here is a complete abstinence from alcoholism. At no point does anything that no amount of spiritual growth, no amount of connection to God will ever allow you to take one drink of alcohol again. And that is the question that we cannot answer. How come I can't go back to the good old days when I could drink normally? Perhaps there will never Perhaps there never will be a full answer to these questions. Opinions vary considerably as to why the alcoholic reacts differently from normal people. We are not sure why. Once a certain point is reached, little can be done for him. We cannot answer the riddle. We know that while the alcoholic keeps away from a drink, as he may do for months or years, he reacts much like other men. We are equally positive that once he takes any alcohol, whatever, into his system, something happens, both in the bodily and mental sense, which makes it virtually impossible for him to stop. The experience of any alcoholic will abundantly confirm this. These observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink. So that's where our defense comes, is against that first drink. And from what I understand, I struggled with it for a few years, with the idea of going back to the good old days. You know, there was a period in my life when I drank and I enjoyed it, and I had fun, and I could burn a doob with the guys and hang out. And I struggled for a few years to get back to that, and I had to learn for myself that it was over, that it was gone, it wasn't coming back. And that, to me, is what I see when I see people in relapse in AA. The sad thing is that some people that I know have been in relapse for the better part of 10 years, 12. I know this one girl that for 15 years that I know her, she is still out there trying to do it and enjoy one here or there. And that's the only thing I can say, was that I was fortunate enough that it only lasted a couple of years, but some people are out there trying to, you know, they come in for a couple of months, they get sober, and they go, hey, things are going good. I wonder if I can have one again, go back to the good old days. And only defense is against the first one, and as long as you never get the idea in your head that you can take one without it leading to another. I believe that has to do with the first step, is smashing that first step into your head, that you are powerless once you take that first one. And he tells us that these observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took that first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than in his body. If you ask him why he started on that last bender, the chances are he will offer you any one of 100 alibis. Sometimes these excuses have a certain plausibility, but none of them really make sense in the light of the havoc an alcoholic drinking bout creates. They sound like the philosophy of the man who, having a headache, beats himself on the head with a hammer so that he can't feel the ache. If you draw this fallacious reasoning to the attention of an alcoholic, he will laugh it off or become irritated and refuse to talk. Once in a while he may tell the truth, and the truth, strange to say, is usually that he has no more idea why he took that first drink than you have. Some drinkers have excuses with which they are satisfied part of the time, but in their hearts, they really do not know why they do it. Once this malady has a real hold, they are a baffled lot. There is the obsession that somehow, someday, they will beat the game, but they often suspect they are down for the count. And that's what I was talking about. In hindsight, I look at my own alcoholism, and that's the only thing that I can really relate to you, is my experience with it. And I'd have to tell you that in the back of my head, I really wanted to go back to when I could hang out. I often thought, how am I going to hang out with friends now that I can't drink a beer and smoke a doob or something? You know, what the hell am I going to do? But I later found out that, it's easy. It really is. It's once you want it. I had some friends who said, it was strange. I went straight from the House of Hope to the House of Dope. Man, the guys were dealing weed, and they had parties with 1,000 people passing around LSD in the front yard. I mean, 1,000 people, guys. And the police would direct traffic in and out of these guys' parties, and I was working for them and staying with them, and I didn't have a bit of trouble. I didn't want it, and I was immune. I still am to this day. I have not had an obsession for that drink hit me at all in any way. There is the obsession that somehow, someday, they will beat the game, but they often suspect they are down for the count. And I felt that for that last couple of years. I thought, I'll be honest with you, what I thought was that I was smarter than everybody else, and because you had a spiritual solution in AA in which you could completely stop drinking, that I was a little smarter than you, and I was going to figure out how to take that spiritual solution to completely stop and work it into this plan I had to go back to when I could control my drinking, and I could somehow make this mathematical possibility come to life, and it didn't work. How true this is, few realize. In a vague way, their families and friends sense that these drinkers are abnormal, but everybody hopefully awaits the day the sufferer will arouse himself from his lethargy, and assert his power of will. The tragic truth is that if a man be a real alcoholic, the happy day may not arrive. He has lost control. At a certain point, and the drinking of every alcoholic, he passes into a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. This tragic situation has already arrived in practically every case long before it is suspected. And this next paragraph is in italics for a reason. The fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. And now there's the statement right there that I tell you what, how many times have I sat in a meeting? I've been sober for like 20 years now, and actually 20 years 2 days ago. I sit in meetings, and I'm always hearing people saying, I choose not to drink today. And there's a new person in that meeting who's coming in here to try to figure out how this AA works, and they're trying to amass information. And that's, from my standpoint, that's what I'm always thinking of, the new people. How can we pass on this information to the new people? Because that's your job now. Once you get sober, as a matter of fact, I can find you some stuff in our literature and Comes of Age and in some of the other literature where literally 2 weeks of sobriety and being ahead of the next person behind you is all that's required for you to try to help somebody else. Because helping other people is all we have. And the idea that you have to wait to finish the steps before you start helping others is a falsehood in Alcoholics Anonymous, because helping others is the only thing that's going to keep us sober. And it says that it's the foundation stone of your recovery. It doesn't say it's the end result of your recovery. Helping others is the foundation stone of your recovery. So, that's the message I'm going to try to get to every meeting that I go to from now on. Because, we sit in meetings and we go, how come nobody's making it? Why doesn't anybody get sober? Oh, it's just one of those things. Yeah, it's one of those things when you're not teaching the right stuff out there. And one of the things I was talking about was that people come in here and they go, I choose not to drink today. And that's where that comes in, what I was telling you, that not everybody who's in this room has to have a spiritual solution, has to surrender their life to God, has to completely say to themselves, my only reason from this point on is to serve the God of my understanding, has to see their free will and hold it in their hands and say, thank you, God, for my free will. I want to offer it back to you and ask you, now what do you want me to do? Because that, when we get out to the third step, I'll try to explain some of the details of the steps. But right now we're kind of in step one, if you haven't noticed that or not. There's a whole lot of step one material in here. But the whole idea of the power of choice and drink is we need to point stuff out like that for the new people so that they understand that there are people in here who can choose not to drink, and it ain't me. I chose not to drink, and I found myself sitting at the bar going, again? How'd I end up? It's like I was sleepwalking or something. Okay, so our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are without defense against the first drink. And when we read on, we're going to find out where the insanity. If you'll remember back to Bill's story, he said, fear sobered me for a bit. I'll tell you what, turn back to Bill's story for just a minute. I'll tell you what page we go into. Bill's step one is on page 8. And on page 8, he says, right like the second full paragraph down from the top up there, trembling. Now, this is like Bill's step one. I got these 2 or 3 paragraphs circled as Bill's step one, his explanation, his experience as step one came to him in his life. Trembling, I stepped from the hospital, a broken man. Fear sobered me for a bit. Then came the insidious insanity of that first drink, and on Armistice Day 1934, I was off again. I believe that this was like his last, or his second to last drunk. But the idea here is that fear can keep us sober for a period of time. The fear of what will happen if I drink. That's why whenever I hear people come in here and say that they had some time in sobriety and then they relapsed, there's one of two things that went wrong. Either they weren't staying close to God, or because I tell you, from my own experience, and that's all it is that there was one day in my life I asked God for help, and all of a sudden I felt the presence of God in my life. I felt like there was a reason for everything, and I have not had even the thought of it. I mean, the thought of a drink, yeah, but I've never had that obsession that said, you got to go have a drink, and that's all there is to it. That obsession has not entered me in 20 years, and I am a real alcoholic. I could tell you some stories, but I'd rather not. So what he's saying here is, then came the insidious insanity of that first drink, and that's where we're getting at right now, is where does that insidious insanity come from? What makes me say inside my head, I can have one this time? Knowing that over the years I have fought that first drink, and I have tried to drink one and stop, and I know that it's not happening. I know it's not happening. Yet still, out of nowhere, he calls it the insidious insanity. I can have one somehow. I'm like, where the hell does that come from? And there you are with a beer in your hand. And what's next? Oh, the hell with it. It's over now. We'll try again next time. We are without defense against the first drink. Back on 24, and there's a solution. The almost certain consequences that follow taking even a glass of beer do not crowd into the mind to deter us. If these thoughts occur, they are hazy and readily supplanted with the old threadbare idea that this time we shall handle ourselves like other people. There is a complete failure of the kind of defense that keeps one from putting his hand on a hot stove. And you know, that's one of the theories that I've used over the years for the amends of the ninth step. Remember, out in the amends of the ninth step, because the amends are one of our three spiritual solutions. We have three spiritual solutions that are actually outlined. When he says we go into details in here, we go into the details of how to forgive when we're angry, how to make amends when we've harmed other people, and how to have faith in God to combat our fears, okay? And those are the spiritual solutions of Alcoholics Anonymous. I can show you what page they're on, and we'll read through them. But one of the things I'm getting at here is that when he says here, there is the complete failure of the kind of defense that keeps one from putting his hand on a hot stove. And, you know, that's just common sense in your brain. Don't put your hand on a hot stove, it's going to burn you. But there's that story out there of the cat on the cold stove. You guys have heard that one, right? The cat's cruising across the counters. He steps on the hot stove, goes flying in the air and tears out. About a week later, he finally gets up the nerve to go across the counter again. He's coming across that counter, and the stove is cold. But the cat remembers that he got burned. He walks around the stove because he's cat on the cold stove theory. And the theory that I'm getting to there is that one of the reasons that we begin to make amends is that we clear away the guilt that we feel for the harms that we had done others. One of the other reasons is, if you'll read those promises of the ninth step, is that we will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us, is essentially a statement, and I like to use this statement in the idea that what we do when we practice these spiritual principles in all our affairs is we're teaching ourselves that there's a price to be paid. When he says that there's a lack of defense that one keeps one from putting his hand on a hot stove, is if I pay the price for the things that I do, if I hurt somebody and I go up and I fess up and I make my amends and I teach myself that there's a price to be paid when I hurt other people, I am much less likely subconsciously. I mean, because here's the thought when we're doing that third column in the fourth step. Why am I making a list of what part of my life that it affects? My self-esteem, my ambitions, my personal relations. Why am I making that list? What possible reason could they have for that? Because we're trying to understand that nobody makes a conscious decision to do these things. That you are running on your instincts. Your instincts are telling you, do this because you're afraid for yourself, and you have to teach that subconscious instinct within yourself that there's a price to be paid for acting like that. If you continue to think only of yourself and not think of others and think that there's not a price to be paid, you're wrong. The price is alcoholism. So you must teach yourself to to have this reaction of putting your hand on a hot stove, only we're using that analogy in how if you go out and harm others. If you think you're going to say something hurtful to somebody, do something, steal, lie, cheat, and be immune to the effects that it's going to have on you, you are wrong. The effects that it's going to have is you will not have this defense against the first drink. We're trying to build a defense against the first drink, and that comes from teaching our subconscious selves to apply these spiritual solutions and to stop being angry, stop being afraid, and stop feeling guilty for harming others. Number one, by not harming others and by forgiving through the process of regular implementation of forgiveness, you will begin to be able to apply that forgiveness subconsciously. You understand that you won't have to sit down and think, okay, let's go over the page again about how to forgive. I ask God for help. I see them as if they too, just like me, are perhaps spiritually sick. I ask God, how can I be of help to the person that I'm angry at? And I go out and I do something to help this person. And those are the process. Something like that is trying to teach me. I'm trying to teach my subconscious self how to react to what does it say? To intuitively know how to handle those situations. Whereas I didn't have a clue. My intuitive way of handling anger was to get in somebody's face, possibly get into a fight, maybe even worry the cops were going to be after me for the next couple of weeks, find a whole new place to hang out and go, you know what I'm talking, I've had people around here do that. I can't go to the bottom line. I got into a fight over there. The cops are looking for me. I haven't had that happen to me in a long time. The alcoholic may say to himself, I'll stop in a minute. The alcoholic may say to himself in the most casual way, it won't burn me this time, so here's how. Or perhaps he doesn't think at all. How often have some of us begun to drink in this nonchalant way, and after the third or fourth pounded on the bar and said to ourselves, for God's sakes, how did that ever get started again? Only to have that thought supplanted by, well, I'll stop with the sixth drink, or what's the use anyhow? When this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, he has probably placed himself beyond human aid, and unless locked up, may die or go permanently insane. So that's one of the things we're trying to burn into our head right here. If you are this third fellow here, this real alcoholic, you have probably placed yourself beyond human aid, and unless locked up, may die or go permanently insane. These stark and ugly facts have been confirmed by legions of alcoholics throughout history. But for the grace of God, there would have been thousands more convincing demonstrations. So many want to stop, but cannot. Okay, I'm going to stop right there, and we're going to begin next week with there is a solution right there. And that's a very good, I got that whole 2 or 3 paragraphs there circled. And now remember, he's saying there is a solution, and he's fixing to tell you what the solution is. And how many times have we read that in a meeting and just go zoom right through there and go, I didn't see a damn thing. I tell you, I read the paragraph that it explains forgiveness, and I must have been like 8 years sober before somebody slowed me down and said, you just read how to forgive. Have you ever tried that in your life? No, I still scream at people when they park in my spot or something, something stupid like that. But that's just an analogy of how stupid some of the things I've gotten into arguments over have been over the years. But anyway, we'll pick up where we left off here, and there's a solution. And as we work our way through here, maybe we'll, go out into some of these latter pages and look up. One of the things I keep referring to is out in the chapter to wives is really the only place in this book that Bill Wilson goes into the 4 types of alcoholics and how to approach each one of those types when you're trying to help them through the sponsorship. Because in the doctor's opinion, that's not Bill Wilson explaining that. That's the doctor explaining when the doctor wrote 5 types, the manic depressive, he's got the 5 types in the doctor's opinion, but Bill wrote the 4 types out in the chapter to wives. And I've always, why do you hide that out there? Why didn't he put that over here where we really could have used it back and there's a solution or something? There is a solution. Almost none of us like the self-searching, leveling of our pride, the confession of shortcomings, which the process requires for its successful consummation. But we saw that it really worked in others, and we had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it. When, therefore, we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved, there was nothing left for us but to pick up a simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet, We have found much heaven, and we have been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence, of which we had not even dreamed. You know, the next paragraph here, he's talking about this, the way that the Creator has entered our hearts, and to me, that's what he's talking about when he's talking about that fourth dimension of existence, is that everywhere I go and everything I do, I actually feel the presence of God there with me. I mean, sometimes you might have to step away from the situation for a minute and remind yourself, but it's 90% of the time it's right there. I mean, I don't even have to try to make a contact with it. The great fact is just this and nothing less. That's a pretty profound statement right there. The great fact is just this and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences. And they got that little asterisk there at the bottom of the page, and I don't think we're going to read that. It's kind of silly. My personal opinion, I don't go back and read it very often. Which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and towards God's universe. Now, stopping to think about that for a minute, how has it revolutionized my whole attitude toward life, toward my fellows, and towards God's universe? From my own experience, and it comes from this book, was that I was living my life based on self, and that today I've almost gone completely in the other direction, in which I feel in my heart that my only reason for living today is to serve God and to serve others. That is my primary reason in life, and that everything else in my life comes after that. And I really don't have to stop and convince myself of it anymore, because I've been through the experience of living, thinking of others, and then I've lived all those years thinking of myself, and I can tell you that I have definitely kind of whole attitude, revolutionized my whole attitude toward life, toward my fellows, and toward God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do by ourselves. If you are as seriously alcoholic as we were, you know, I bring this paragraph up a lot when I'm... In AA meetings, not everybody is as seriously alcoholic as I am. That there are people in these AA meetings who can stop on a non-spiritual basis. They come in here, but the requirement doesn't say that you have to be able... your only way of stopping is a non-spiritual basis or a spiritual basis. It says the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. So anybody who wants to and has a desire to stop drinking is welcome in here. But there are a few of us, in my opinion, I don't know. My personal experience is, how many people do you see sponsoring literally dozens or hundreds of people around here? How many people do you see going after sponsoring others like their life depends upon it? Do you understand the difference that I'm talking about? There are people who come in here, who come in and hang out. They answer the phone in the middle of the meeting. They leave early. They hit on the women. They're doing things that you're looking at them going, look, that guy's half-assing his recovery. Why can't I half-ass my recovery? Why do I have to work so hard to stay sober? Because there's a difference between those people. There are some people who come in here that can stop. When you go into the types of alcoholics, out into the chapter of the wives, and when you back up into the doctor's opinion, they give like the doctor's opinion gives 5 types of alcoholics, and the chapter of the wives gives 4 types, and then it explains how to approach those different 4 types. But the idea we're trying to get to here is that not everybody is as seriously alcoholic as we were, as the way he's put it right here. Literally, it's going to be the most important thing in my life that I go after other people in sponsorship. And to implement these lives, the 3 spiritual solutions, into my life every day. So if you are as seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe there is no middle-of-the-road solution. That's coming in late, leaving early, answering your phone. If you're a real alcoholic, it's not going to work for you. And you're going to sit there and wonder why that this other guy can do it and you can't. That there's something different about you. This AA stuff just doesn't work for you. But all the while, they never actually give the AA thing a shot. They're saying, well, he comes in late and he leaves early and he's hanging out and doing nothing. He's sponsoring nobody. I've seen him in here for years. He sponsors no one and he stays sober. Why can't I do that? We were in a position where life was becoming impossible, and if we had passed into the region from which there is no return through human aid, we had but 2 alternatives. And I have to tell you, the two alternatives for me wasn't a matter of reading it in a book. It was a matter of it came from a bottle. One day it hit me. I was going to die, or I got to do this AA thing, and there is no middle-of-the-road solution. There's only two answers to this question. There's not a third. I tried the third one to go back to the good old. That was my third option. One option, as he says here, was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could. The other, to accept spiritual help. I had a third solution. That third solution was to go back to drinking when it was fun. And I tried that for many years before I came in here. This we did because we honestly wanted to and were willing to make the effort. I have to tell you the truth. I didn't want to. I felt like I was threatened. My only option was die or get sober. And I felt forced to do it, and it was later on that I voluntarily do this on my own. Today I say to myself, I offer myself to God voluntarily because this is what I want to do with my life. But before I said, I offer myself to God because I don't want to die. And you haven't given me a third solution. There's no other way out. I don't want to do this, but I have to. But today I actually, like he says here, because we honestly wanted to and were willing to make the effort. Today I think that's the right thing for my self-will, is to see it for what it is and offer it back to God. Now, this next paragraph is about this guy, Roland Hazard. You guys have heard of Roland Hazard? I don't know if you have. Roland Hazard is the guy who got Ebby Thatcher. Okay, Ebby Thatcher was back in Bill's story. Ebby Thatcher was a childhood friend of Bill Wilson's. He was in a sanitarium, and they were going to lock him up. And this guy, two guys from the Oxford groups, went before a judge to get Ebby Thatcher released to them so that they could try the four absolutes of the Oxford groups, which later became a rough cut of the six steps that they were working at that time. And this guy, he's talking about Roland Hazard here. A certain American businessman had ability, good sense, and high character. For years he had floundered from one sanitarium to another. He had consulted the best-known American psychiatrist. Then he had gone to Europe, which was Sweden, right? Placing himself in the care of a celebrated physician, the psychiatrist Dr. Jung, which was Dr. Carl Jung. He's one of the, he's kind of like the Sigmund Freud. He was one of the early founders of modern psychiatry, psychology. He's like, he's one of the big guys up there, who prescribed for him. Though experience had made him skeptical, he finished his treatment with the usual confidence. His physical and mental condition were unusually good. Above all, he believed he had acquired such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and its hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. Nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time. More baffling still, he could give himself no satisfactory explanation for this fall. They're going to later on, they're going to tell us that knowledge of your condition will not keep you sober. And when I first got sober, we used to sit in front of these. This was back in 1990 down at the House of Hope and a couple other places I filtered through 20 years ago. And they used to sit us in front of these TV screens when they'd have doctors in smocks come up and explain to us the chemical compositions and the molecular effects that it had on the brain, the human brain, and how your brain was what got you drunk and your brain was what got you high. It wasn't the drugs. They were poisoning you. The alcohol poisons you, your brain. And I thought that all that stuff was pure genius, and it didn't mean nothing. It meant absolutely nothing. When it comes down to it, we're going to get into another chapter. I believe it's in the chapter We Agnostics. Bill Wilson talks about how the bridge of reason does not lead to the land of faith. And that's one of the ideas that we're trying to get to here is, the idea that self-knowledge will not keep you sober. You must act on sobriety. What you do with your life must manifest in service for others and service to God. Otherwise, no amount of knowledge, no amount of anything that you learn is going to make a bit of difference if you don't actually live your life in service of God. And I feel in my heart that my life is only meant to be, sacrificed for others, which I always say if I had a list of reasons why I'm alive today, it would have to be the number one reason now. I mean, what would be the number two? Self would be number two, and I know where self got me. So he returned to this doctor whom he had admired and asked him point blank why he could not recover. He wished above all things to regain self-control. He seemed quite rational and well-balanced with respect to other problems, yet he had no control whatever over alcohol. Why was this? He begged the doctor to tell him the whole truth, and he got it. And the doctor's judgment was utterly hopeless. He could never regain his position in society, and he would have to place himself under lock and key or hire a bodyguard if he expected to live long. That was the great physician's opinion. But this man still lives. He is a free man. He does not need a bodyguard, nor is he confined. He can go anywhere on this earth where other men may go without disaster, provided he remains willing to maintain a certain simple attitude. And that is the attitude that we're going to be getting to here. The attitude of selflessness on the premise that selfishness and thinking of myself. And you know, when we get out to the fourth step, that's one of the things that's really been burning into my head over the last few years, was that third column in the fourth step where it says that part of my life that it affects. I never gave that a second look for many years. I used to always look at that third column and go, I don't know, it's just one of them things they're having you write down. It affects my self-esteem, my security, my personal relations, my ambitions. You guys are, some of you know what I'm talking about, and others, if not, we'll get out there in a few, another week or two, whatever it is, probably a few months, the way I'm reading. But anyway, one of the things I was getting at was that I never made a conscious decision to be a selfish, self-centered person. I was simply running on my instincts, and my instinct for self-preservation is what runs my life even to this day, and I have to fight it tooth and nail, hand-to-hand combat with my self-will, with the fear that I'm not going to have what I want in life, that I'm going to lose the things that I have already gained. It's like a constant battle. It's literally is almost, in my opinion, like trench warfare, the World War I that Bill Wilson was about to experience when he saw that Winchester Cathedral, that first little hint of spirituality that he got. Some of our alcoholic readers may think they can do without spiritual help. Let us tell you the rest of the conversation our friend had with his doctor. The doctor said, "You have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. I have never seen one single case recover where that state of mind existed to the extent that it does in you." So you see, there's a difference between this person that he's talking about here. This is a life and death thing for this person, and there's no other way out of here but spiritual help. And my own experience with it was that I came into AA and I saw people who were getting the things in life and were not dedicating their life to sponsorship and helping others and learning these steps and implementing these spiritual solutions into their daily lives. And I wanted the easy way. I wanted the what do you say, there is no middle of the road. I wanted the middle of the road solution. Half measures availed us nothing. I wanted to half measure it. But half measures don't avail you half sobriety. Half measures, if you were a real alcoholic, if you were as seriously alcoholic as we are, there is no middle of the road solution. Half measures avail us nothing. You have got to go after these steps and implement these spiritual solutions and help others through the 12 steps, or you're not going to make it. And you're going to scratch your head wondering, why does that guy who's sitting around doing nothing make it? Because they're not real alcoholics. They don't, a spiritual solution, maybe they're the alcoholic type number one who can stop if they really wanted to. If something bad enough happens, they can stop. But those bad things never stopped me. Matter of fact, they probably made me drink worse. He said to the doctor, "Is there no exception?" "Yes," replied the doctor, "there is. Exceptions to cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. To me, occurrences are phenomena. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements, ideas, emotions, and attitudes which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men, which are, I am the center of the universe, I am the reason for everything, I was the reason that the dinosaurs were here in preparation for the day that I got here, that the whole world revolved around me, and now I have to completely invert that and say that God is the reason for everything, and that I am here to serve that whoever it is, that whatever it is that created this place, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. In fact, I have been trying to produce some such emotional rearrangements within you. With many individuals, the methods which I employ are successful, but I have never been successful with an alcoholic of your description. Upon hearing this, our friend was somewhat relieved, for he reflected that after all, he was a good church member. This hope, whatever, was destroyed by the doctors telling him that while his religious convictions were very good, in his case, they did not spell the necessary vital spiritual experience. Here was the terrible dilemma in which our friend found himself when he had the extraordinary experience which, as we have already told you, made him a free man. Now, I'm pretty sure that I read in not Pass It On, but the other one, Comes of Age. I read in Comes of Age that even Bill didn't remember which one of them gave him, whether it was Dr. Silkworth or Ebby Thatcher, that gave him the book William James, Varieties of Religious Experience, which is where a lot of the foundation of our program of recovery came from, was that, and that little asterisk we were reading there, it's about to mention it here in a minute, that little asterisk that was on that other page that says, see Appendix 2, that really is, it's a reference to William James's idea that most religious experience, as they call it, spiritual experience, is what we come to call it today is spiritual experience, and spiritual awakening is in the steps. Spiritual awakening is only one place, and it's right there. It was in, and they changed that. The editorial board changed that. Most of the places it says spiritual experience, not awakening, and the term came from this William James book, where he goes into, that roughly 10% of them are sudden and profound, like Bill Wilson's was, and 90% are gradual and educated, and takes even decades to come about. But anyway, a lot of that idea came from that book that he's fixing to mention here, and it came from Ebby Thatcher, who got it from this guy, Roland Hazard, who bailed Ebby out of the predicament that he was in. I even heard somebody say last week when we were talking about it that one of those two guys was the son of the judge who Ebby was in front of. But anyway, to my experience, there's a lot in the history of Alcoholics Anonymous, because it's either those who forget the past are condemned to repeat it sort of thing. If you're a real alcoholic, then the history of AA is of importance to you, because it's your future or it's not your future. That's the way I look at it anyway. I've always wanted to know the details of how they came about, all that stuff. We, in turn, sought the same escape with all the desperation of drowning men. What seemed at first a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God. A new life has been given us, or, if you prefer, a design for living that really works. That's one of my favorite things to use, too. We, in our turn, sought the same escape with all the desperation of drowning men. To grasp this Alcoholics Anonymous program and these steps and this book and these directions with all the desperation. How many people do you see come in here and do that? I mean, really. I don't think I did that either, but it's been a long time that I've been sticking my head in this book so I don't go back out, I have dedicated a lot of my life to this, so I don't end up one of the many who comes in here and says, I lost my time. Oh, well. The distinguished American psychologist William James, in his book Varieties of Religious Experience, and if Bill Wilson says that while he was still working his steps and somewhat /detox in his last time in the hospital up there with Dr. Silkworth, that Ebby Thatcher he says, I can't remember, but I think Ebby Thatcher gave me that book. He came in and gave him this book, and that's where these ideas came to him, was number one, through the Oxford groups, because Ebby was one alcoholic helping another, and this Varieties of Religious Experience, which Bill was reading while he had his, so to speak, indicates a multitude of ways in which men have discovered God. We have no desire to convince anyone that there is only one way by which faith can be acquired. If what we have learned and felt and seen means anything at all, it means that all of us, whatever our race, creed, or color, are the children of a loving Creator with whom we may form a relationship. So how we form our relationship with this God is on the premise of self versus selflessness, And as we get into those latter, the latter pages out into how it works, we're going to see that self manifests in our lives in three primary forms: anger, fear, and guilt. And that we have three spiritual solutions that we're going to apply, which include action, something you're going to do in your daily life to combat these three most common forms of self. Remember, I never made a conscious decision to be a selfish, self-centered person. I was simply running on my instincts. My instinct for self-preservation said, you got to get what you got to get to survive. And I didn't know it was running my life. But today, there is a way that I can combat that. I can find these things. I find my anger, find my fear, and find my guilt, and I apply the spiritual solutions to them. I apply forgiveness with the help of God and the action of how can I be of help to them. I apply faith. The 12th step is the directions for faith, and by the way, faith in God is helping others find their way to God, and dedicating your life to helping others is how we achieve freedom from fear based in self. But anyway, when we get out to those pages, we'll go into those details. Children of a loving Creator with whom we may form a relationship upon simple and understandable terms. That's a very simple idea. That through living step 12 in my life, the fear that drives me to that first drink. Remember, when we get on to these later pages too, we're going to see that there is a driving force behind my obsession for that first drink. I cannot take a drink ever again as long as I live, no matter how spiritual I get, and that's a question that no one has ever been able to answer. Why? Why is spirituality and a spiritual way of life give me a lifetime of sobriety, yet I can never take one drink no matter how spiritual I get? That's the unanswered question that we have in AA. But anyway, back to this simple and understandable terms as soon as we are willing and honest enough to try. Those having religious affiliations will find here nothing disturbing to their beliefs or ceremonies. There is no friction among us over such matters. We think it no concern of ours what religious bodies our members identify themselves with as individuals. This should be an entirely personal affair which each one decides for himself in the light of past associations or his present choice. In other words, God as you understand him. That's how they... And, whenever people come into AA meetings, this is out in the chapter Working with Others, it explains that you will greatly handicap yourself if you come in here touting religious ideas and religious attitudes. What you're going to do is you're going to narrow down the field of people that you can help to those people of that religion. Somebody of any other affiliation, like say you're Christian, someone who's Jewish or Muslim or Hindu or Buddhist or something, is going to look at you like, hey, he's trying to teach his version of God. I'm really not into that right now. So one of the things that we do is we go out there, and no matter how religious you feel, do not try to teach other people your religion. Just tell them we have these 12 steps in which whatever God it is that you believe in, we think we can help you get closer to that God. Because it will greatly handicap you, because no one's going to ask you to sponsor them. If you're out there going, religious stuff this, religious stuff that, remember that. It will greatly handicap you, not them. They'll just find somebody who doesn't do that. Not all of us join religious bodies, but most of us favor such memberships. In the following chapter, there appears an explanation of alcoholism as we understand it, then a chapter addressed to the agnostic. Many who once were in this class are now among our members. Surprisingly, remember it says like 50%, half of our original fellowship, 50% of 100 was 50 of the first 100. Surprisingly enough, we find such convictions no great obstacle to a spiritual experience. Further on, clear-cut directions are given. Now, I was sober for years before I realized that there were clear-cut directions. I tell you that in 1990, there was something floating around in all the AA rooms which sounded something like this. Your steps are between you and your sponsor, and however many sponsors are out there, it is how many ever different ways there are of working the steps. You can have a dozen different ways of how to work any one of those steps, depending on who it is. And then I ran across a guy and said, "You've been talking to the wrong people, because we have clear-cut directions in here on precisely what you're going to be doing, showing how we recovered. These are followed by 43 personal experiences. Each individual in the personal stories describes in his own language and from his own point of view the way he established his relationship with God. These give a fair cross-section of our membership and a clear-cut idea of what has actually happened in their lives. There's that word, clear-cut. Clear-cut directions are given. We hope no one will consider these self-revealing accounts in bad taste. Our hope is that many alcoholic men and women desperately in need will see these pages, and we believe that it is only by fully disclosing ourselves and our problems that they will be persuaded to say, yes, I am one of them too. I must have this thing. So we'll open up the floor, and we'll start on them more about alcoholism next week. And we got 20... Old Civil War silver dollar from the Civil War is a Confederate silver dollar. It says the Confederated States of America, CSA. Got all this, and I got some brand new ones, and I scraped them all up and worn them down. I threw them in the back of my truck, and they've been rolling around in the grease and the dirt, and trying to make them look old, you know.
Now what?
I'm trying to make it look real. It's not a real coin.
Oh, not real, huh?
They sell brand new Confederate money up there, right out. They sell it to you. Coins and paper money and everything, real Confederate money, but it's not old stuff from back when. It's brand new. And I've had it for like 2 or 3 years sitting in my back of my truck rolling around in all the grime and dirt and grease. And I keep, oh, there it is. I see it every once in a while. One of these days I'm going to put it in the road or something, run over it for a couple of months. Hey, how's it going? I wanted to take it to one of those battlefields up there and just toss it out the window. Let it lay on the ground in one of them battlefields. Because I don't know where you guys are from, but there's battlefields everywhere in Chattanooga.
Yeah.
I mean, you drive and it's just like the entire valley. As big as Pompano Beach is the Chickamauga battlefield. Cannons over here, monuments over there. 200,000 dead Yankees over here, 50,000 dead Confederates. The dead Yankees outnumber the Confederates 2-1. It's like somebody went out and bought some real coffee, huh? Put that coffee machine asshole out of fucking business.
You know, they have that same machine at where I work, and it's $1 for a cup of coffee.
How much is that one? That's $1, isn't it? 75? Oh.
Most $1 where we work. Same machine, too.
You mean where you work, they won't even give you coffee? Do they have a pot you can bring your own stuff and make it? What a cheesy bunch, boy. I tell you, everybody's a...
I think that company owns
You know,
the machines. I don't
there is nowhere in Miami that you can park that you don't have to pay. Nowhere. You cannot park anywhere without paying for it. On the side of the road, at a park, on a fucking anywhere. There's meters and they'll have one big electronic meter with 500 spaces. And you got to put the receipt in your windshield or you'll get a fucking ticket. The whole goddamn place. They start doing that shit everywhere, probably. I guess the more people you get, you know, living in a rural or a city like that, anything they can do to get money. Nickel and dime here, nickel and dime there. Shit, there was this one lot we were paying to work at Bal Harbor 1. We were paying $8 a day for an 8 hour. It's $1 an hour. You pay $8 every day you work to park there. Huh? Yeah. But when you're making, you know, $200 a day, $8 a day, it's, you know, you're like, okay. It's the percentage of your pay. You're like, oh, fuck it, it ain't that.
It is everybody. That's what all here, huh?
Yeah, it's getting pretty bad. If I got a deck of cards, we'll just play.
You got the chips right there.
Yeah, right. That's what I always say. Here in South Florida, we got a chip system, and the white chips are $1. The red chips are $5. No, it's past 8:30. That thing's slower. It's 8:33.
Two tracks. Two tracks behind you.
What's behind you?
Big tracks.
Oh, well,
You like one? No?
no. I just brushed my teeth before I got here. Well, hello, all four of you, and welcome to the Bottom Line Group. We ask that you silence your cell phones. Fuck it, if it rings, it rings. This is an open meeting of blah, blah, blah. You guys know the routine. Why even go through the rigmarole, huh? All right, so the chapter, no, more about alcoholism. This is more about alcoholism, focuses primarily on step one. You know that the next chapter, chapter 4, We Agnostics, is essentially dedicated to step 2. You know, do you believe in God, yes or no? And more about alcoholism is, there's a lot in here about mostly step 1, but then there's the area where you transition that we have, where he's talking about the insanity of the jaywalker who keeps skipping out in front of moving trolleys, trolley cars for the high and all that, and the idea that he's trying to get across is the insanity that precedes the first drink, not the insanity that's a result of years of drinking, which I know is a really big misconception in AA today. And you know, how many times have I been in a meeting where I hear somebody say, my life's getting insane again? And I say, well, then you just completely missed the idea behind insanity in the second step, that God will restore us to sanity. All he's going to restore you to is your reaction to the first drink. It's the insanity that precedes the first drink that we're looking to be restored with. But anyway, that's the second half of this, more about alcoholism. And we got there's really a real good description of, here in the middle of the page here on chapter 3, page 30. So I'm an alcoholic. My name's Doug. And this is chapter 3, more about alcoholism. And yeah, that thing's got a noisy gearbox, doesn't it? The gearbox is in there whining away and moving things. And okay, most of us have been unwilling to admit we were real alcoholics. No person likes to think he is bodily and mentally different from his fellows. Therefore, it is not surprising that our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts to prove we could drink like other people. The idea that somehow, someday, he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. Now, that's pretty clear right there. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. The great obsession of every abnormal drinker, that someday he will control and enjoy his drinking. The only thing I can think of is that there was a period for myself, there was a period in my life when it was fun, and I did control it to a point that it was, most people said, hey, he's, going out and partying, but he's doing the normal things that normal people do, until it got to the point that the normal things that normal people do just didn't exist anymore, and all I was trying to do was recapture the good old days, as I call it. I wanted to go back to the good old days when I could drink again. And I don't know, man. That's one of my unanswered questions in AA. It was, why? How come there was a point in my life when I reached it and I said, that's it, I just don't want to do it anymore? And on page 30, more about alcoholism. It's the thing everybody reads in the beginning. Most of us have been unwilling to admit we were blah, blah. We're like men who've lost their legs and all that. I always get uncomfortable with that. I was at a meeting at the Boca Pines, and there was a guy with one leg, and every time they'd hand it to me, I'd be like, I'm not reading that. He's kind of a buddy of mine. I talk to him all the time. He's got one leg. What am I going to... We're like this guy who lost one leg. He'll never grow a new... That's kind of... All right, so now this is what I've learned is a very it's really the first place in here where it says that this is the first step. You're working on the first step right here. And when he says we learned, we had to fully concede, he's talking about we, the first 100 that, supposedly wrote the book. Of course, it was Bill that wrote the book. And there were several, probably 8 or 10 people, of the most sober people who had the most time, like Dr. Bob, and who gave him a little input on what to do. Should they change this? And the whole God as we understand him thing came out. So, of course, this is like in the chapter when Bill writes the chapter to wives, he's actually writing it as if there was a wife giving comments and a wife telling you what was going on, but it's Bill Wilson writing it. And it's his wife who's giving him a little, here, write this, write that. So you might say he's like the ghost writer, but here he's the ghost writer for all the first 100 people who were sober at the time. And whenever you see we learned we had to fully concede, it goes back to the idea that there's a lot of the rehab and halfway house stuff creeping into our AA today, and what's wrong with that is that people give the illusion that you can have a support group of people that you can call on, and that somehow that will suffice to be your sobriety. And what that does is it takes away from the idea that you got to be. This is between you and God, and that's what this is. And anything that other people have to do with this is what you can do for those other people. So not so much what you can call and lean on them. You need to be calling on God, and that's. Whenever you're not calling on God and you're calling on other people, you can easily see how that's taken away from the original idea of the program, that we're looking to build a relationship between us and God. And any time you put some kind of interference in there of calling on human solutions, then we sit around and wonder why nobody's making it, But that's what I was getting at, was the we learned we had to fully concede to our innermost selves. And so many people I hear come in here with a misconception of that, going, this is a we program, together we. No, this is a you and God program. You better find God or you ain't going to make it. We learned we had to fully concede. Now, this is what we, the first 100, did when we got sober and stayed sober and never took another drink. We learned that we had to fully concede. That's a very deep statement there. Fully concede to our innermost self. Fully concede. There's no way to wiggle out of that. Partially concede to, a part of ourselves, to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion that we are like other people, or presently may be, has to be smashed, and there's only one way to smash that, and that's trial and error. But the question that I have is, how come so many people spend decades longer than I did with the trial and error part? I mean, I got to tell you, when I was done, and that's all there was to it. I didn't want to do anything anymore, much less drink or. But I see people out there just keep going at it and going at it. We alcoholics are men and women who have lost the ability to control our drinking. We know that no real alcoholic ever recovers that control. All of us felt at times that we were regaining control, but such intervals, usually brief, were inevitably followed by still less control, which led in time to pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization. That's a term that I hear a lot in here, people trying to remember what it says, the whole pitiful and incomprehensible. We are convinced to a man that alcoholics of our type are in the grip of a progressive illness. Over any considerable period, we get worse, never better. Now, that's a pretty flat-out statement there, too. I mean, how many people think that their alcoholism is going to stay steady and they're going to be able to maintain where they're at right now? If you're a real alcoholic, alcoholics of our type are in the grip of a progressive illness that gets worse and worse and worse as time goes on. Over any considerable period, we get worse, never better. It doesn't maintain the same. It gets worse. For me, my fear was that my health was going to get worse. That's one of the things that it still scares me today. That's what keeps me eating like bananas and oranges and vegetables and stuff like that. You're living in a lump of meat, I always thought my health was going to get worse and worse, and I was going to end up looking like those guys that I was hanging with. Looked like they had one foot on a banana peel and the other foot in a grave, I got sober when I was 26, and I looked a lot younger and healthier than I do now, but that scared the hell out of me. We are like men and women who've lost their legs. Oh, wait a minute, it doesn't say women. We are like men who have lost their legs. They never grow new ones. Neither does there appear to be any kind of treatment which will make alcoholics of our kind like other men. We have tried every imaginable remedy. In some instances there has been brief recovery, followed always by a still worse relapse. Physicians who are familiar with alcoholism agree that there is no such thing as making a normal drinker out of an alcoholic. Science may one day accomplish this, but it hasn't done so yet. Where he says we have tried every imaginable remedy, in some instances there has been brief recovery followed always by a still worse relapse. Back in Bill's story, there's a spot where he's in step one. See, what we're talking about here now is step one. You know, the first step. This is the first step in recovery. And when you go back to Bill's story, Bill's got a pretty good description of step one in there where he says, no words. Now, this is page 8 in Bill's story. And he goes on to explain here that there was something that kept him sober for a brief period of time, and that was my experience with it too. I had this experience for a couple of years in my life. No words can tell of the loneliness and despair. This is page 8 in Bill's story. No words, this is like step one for Bill. Despair that I found in that bitter morass of self-pity. Quicksand stretched around me in all directions. I had met my match. I had been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master. Trembling, I stepped from the hospital a broken man, and fear sobered me for a bit. Then came the insidious insanity of that first drink, and on Armistice Day I was off again. Armistice Day 1934, I was off again. So you see what he's saying here is that fear sobered me for a bit. That was my experience too. I would get brief periods of sobriety, sometimes 3 months. I'd get 3 months of sobriety, and then I was actually going to bars and hanging out in the bars going, hey, I can drink orange juice and hang out and shoot pool with the buddies, and eventually I would always end up with a beer in my hand. Fear sobered me for a bit. And the idea that he's talking about, we're going to be getting into that into this chapter, the insidious insanity of that first drink, because that's what we're talking about when we transition into the second step, and he's talking about that God can restore us to sanity. Talking about that the sanity that we're talking about is how you react to the first drink. Do you want one, yes or no? If you say yes, that's insanity. It's been beating you to death for however long it's been doing this. You've been trying to quit. You sworn it off a dozen times. Okay, back to... Despite, this is page 31, back to more about alcoholism. Despite all we can say, many who are real alcoholics, you see that designation that he keeps giving us here, real alcoholics. The idea that some people can still stop on their own on a non-spiritual basis, but some of us are real alcoholics, and we must turn our lives over to the care of God. And we must get close to God, and this must be the most important thing in my life. I was in AA, I was in a meeting the other day, and a guy, I don't remember, he was sitting right next to me, I think he said, I came into AA to get my life back. I didn't come in here to dedicate my life to this place. I want to have my life outside of here. And all I was thinking was, well, we'll see you when you get to White Chip, Chief, because if you're a real alcoholic like me, this has to be the number one thing in your life. All that other stuff, the wife and the kids and the job and all that stuff that's a part of your life will mean nothing if this isn't number one. And he was putting it out there like he came in here, he's going to hang out for a little while and go back out to his real life and the real world and the AA stuff. I don't know. There are people who come in here who aren't like me, who aren't like, if you're a real alcoholic, they don't have to dedicate their lives to this. And that's one of the biggest problems I see in AA is that a lot of people coming in here and they're seeing people come in here and claim that they have 10 years of sobriety and that they were a real alcoholic, and they don't do anything. They don't find God. They don't do the steps. They don't work on this on a daily basis. They don't come into bottom line like their lives depends upon it. And you're looking at them going, well, if he can do it, I can do it too, because I don't want to do that hard work. That is hard work. Dedicating your life to helping others is like another job you have, like raising a kid almost or something. You know, it's a job. Who wants to do that if there's an easy way out of just hanging out in here and getting sober? But that's the mistake I'm making when I think that, is that I'm a real alcoholic and this guy can stop on a non-spiritual basis. It's not a requirement that you're a real alcoholic to be in here. It's only a requirement to desire to stop drinking. Despite all we can say, many who are real alcoholics are not going to believe they are in that class. By every form of self-deception and experimentation, they will try to prove themselves exceptions to the rule, therefore non-alcoholic. If anyone who is showing inability to control his drinking can do the right about face and drink like a gentleman, our hats are off to him. Heaven knows we have tried hard enough and long enough to drink like other people. Here are some of them. I hate this part too. Here are some of the methods we have tried. Drinking beer only, limiting the number of drinks, never drinking alone, never drinking in the morning, drinking only at home, never having it in the house, never drinking during business hours, drinking only at parties, switching from scotch to brandy, drinking only natural wines, agreeing to resign if ever drunk on the job, taking a trip, not taking a trip, swearing off forever, with and without a solemn oath, taking more physical exercise, reading inspirational books, going to health farms and sanitariums. I think that's the idea behind that CNN guy. You know, he comes on and he goes, call and get the cure for alcoholism, 1-800 blah blah. CNN, you guys have seen that guy. Well, that's what his is. His is if you'll look at the book, it says a holistic approach to recovery. And you know what holistic is? It's bananas and broccoli and what's he say here? Going to health farms and sanitariums, taking more physical exercise, reading inspirational books. That's what that holistic approach thing is, as far as I could tell. Accepting voluntary commitment to asylums. We could increase the list ad infinitum. You know, when you're reading this book, it's important for you to remember something. That this book was meant to be your sponsor. To look at it in this light, like there was nobody, you weren't going to any AA meetings because there are none. This is 1939. There are no AA meetings in your town. There's no people who are sober. There's no sponsors to ask to help you. This book was given to you by a friend or the employer, the wife, the family, whoever it was that said, man, that guy's drinking. What can we do? Go down to Books A Million and get him a book. What's the other one? You guys, which one? Yeah, there you go. Barnes & Noble. Go down to Barnes & Noble. Get him a book. So they go down, they buy him a book, and they hand it to him. And this book, you're meant to read this book, understand the steps, and get sober through this. That's how you need to look at this book when you're reading it. And what he's doing now is he's trying to explain to a person who's not in contact with AA, who hasn't been in here for years or bouncing in and out and not familiar with it, exactly what the hell we're doing here. We do not like to pronounce any individual as alcoholic, but you can quickly diagnose yourself, step over to the nearest bar room, and try some controlled drinking. Try to drink and stop abruptly. Try it more than once. It will not take long for you to determine if you are honest with yourself about it. It may be worth a bad case of jitters if you get the full knowledge of your condition. Though there is no way of proving it, we believe that early in our drinking careers, most of us could have stopped drinking. But the difficulty is that few alcoholics have enough desire to stop while there is yet time. We have heard of a few instances where people who showed definite signs of alcoholism were able to stop for a long period because of an overpowering desire to do so. Here is one. So this is a story of a person who was able to stop on his own with a non-spiritual basis because of an overpowering desire to do so. A man of 30 was doing there's several stories in here. I think there's our first example is a friend we should call Jim. We got the what's the guy? Fred is a partner of a well-known accounting firm. The Jay Walker. So these are like several stories he's going to give us of people who are the difference between real alcoholics and non-alcoholics. A man of 30 was doing a great deal of spree drinking. He was very nervous in the morning after these bouts and quieted himself with more liquor. He was ambitious to succeed in business and saw that he would get nowhere if he drank at all. Once he started, he had no control whatever. He made up his mind that until he had been successful in business and had retired, he would not touch another drop. An exceptional man, he remained bone dry for 25 years and retired at the age of 55. After a successful and happy business career, then he fell victim to a belief which practically every alcoholic has, that his long period of sobriety and self-discipline has qualified him to drink like other men. Out came his carpet slippers in a bottle. In 2 months, he was in a hospital, puzzled and humiliated. He tried to regulate his drinking for a while, making several trips to the hospital meantime. Then, gathering all of his forces, he attempted to stop altogether and found he could not. Every means of solving his problem which money could buy was at his disposal. Every attempt failed. Though a robust man at retirement, he went to pieces quickly and was dead within 4 years. This case contains a powerful lesson. Most of us had believed that if we remained sober for a long stretch, we could thereafter drink normally. But here's a man who at 55 years found he was just where he had left off at 30. We have seen the truth demonstrated again and again. The truth is that once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Commencing to drink after a period of sobriety, we are in a short time as bad as ever. If we are planning to stop drinking, there must be no reservation of any kind, nor any lurking notion that someday you will be immune to alcohol. You can never, this is the definition of fully concede to our innermost selves, like it said on page 30 over here. To fully concede to my innermost self, if I am planning to stop drinking, there must be no reservation of any kind, nor any lurking notion anywhere in the back of my head that I'll ever be able to take another drink without it leading back to that nightmare of my life. Now, remember, one thing is that step one will not keep you sober. It's absolutely essential to go on with the rest of the steps to get this. That whole idea about the 100% thing, I got to tell you, I heard a guy say, if you tell people that step one is the only step you need to work 100%, then you're giving them a free pass by the time they get out to step 8 to say, well, you know, by the time you get to step 8, you could be down to like 30% or so. You'd be doing just fine, you know. By the time you get to 9, you know, 25%, it's the only step you need to work 100%. You don't have to work the other steps 100%. So you see, even though Bill Wilson wrote it, and it's in the 12 and 12, it's really unless you say it in that context, you say, look, step one's the only step you need to work 100%, but we suggest you work all of the others 99.9% or as good as you can, you know, as go at it like your life depends upon it. But the way most people say that, you know, it's the only step you need to work 100%, it almost sounds like you're giving them a pass to go, and by the time you get out to step 10, you know, 15, 20%, you'll be fine. That's a lot of people do things like that. Like some people come in here and they go, you know, my best thinking got me here, or something like that. Yeah, your best thinking got you here while you were out there with a bottle in your hand, but you ain't got a bottle in your hand anymore, so now your best thinking's going to keep you in here. I always say, well, you could invert the best thinking got me here thing and say all you have to do is remain stupid and not learn anything, and you're going to get along just fine in here. You're going to stay sober. You got nothing to worry about. All the smart people, they're on their way